important thing is that actually, in terms of the measures, there is nothing actually. There is no specific instruction for Israel. All the things that it demands Israel do, Israel says it's doing already.
Well, let's stick with that court decision as our top story. That UN, and of course it's the top court of the United Nations, has told Israel that it must take all measures to prevent genocide in Gaza, but it has not ordered a ceasefire. The ruling at the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, comes at an early stage in South Africa's case against Israel.
By 15 votes to 2, the State of Israel shall, in accordance with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in relation to the Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention.
The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reacted strongly by saying that Israel has the right to defend itself.
Israel's commitment to international law is unwavering. Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it.
Meanwhile, the South African foreign minister says that the court order doesn't work without a ceasefire. However, the country's president, Cyril Ramaphosa, says that he has welcomed the ICJ's decision.
We note the court's statement that it is acutely aware of the extent of the human tragedy that is unfolding in the region and is deeply concerned about the continuing loss of life and human suffering, and that the catastrophic humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is at serious risk of deteriorating further.
Well, let's now speak with Richard Spencer. He is the Times' correspondent based in Tel Aviv. He's just written a lengthy piece on this, which is online. Now, Richard, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
What do you make of this ruling today? I mean, they've said that they have the jurisdiction, that there is a case, but they have said no ceasefire. What do you read into it?
Yeah, this is a ruling absolutely gives something to everyone in this case. I think the Palestinians had raised a very high bar with their hope that both that the court will eventually rule that what Israel is doing in Gaza is genocide, and they also raised hopes that the International Court would order Israel to stop the military offensive. The International Court did that in the case of Russia in 2022 after Ukraine brought a case at the beginning of that war. I think they probably raised that bar of expectation too high, and so they're rather disappointed today. However, as you heard, the interim ruling did take seriously these South African charges of genocide. It said there was a prima facie case to answer. It didn't throw out the case altogether as Israel wanted, and these interim rulings take very seriously some of the criticisms outlined against Israel by South Africa. Now, of course, it doesn't give any definitive ruling on whether it's genocide, whether it constitutes war crimes. What Israel are doing there's nothing definitive about that. But by giving credence to some of the implicit criticism of Israel, particularly over the extent of civilian losses and the humanitarian disaster, there is something there for the Palestinians too.
And look, we've heard from Benjamin Netanyahu, who's pushed back very vigorously against this. And of course, some of the measures have been calling for more aid, asking, for evidence not to be destroyed, but to be collected. Do you think anything's going to change, Richard, as a result of these kind of measures that have been declared? Or do you think Benjamin Netanyahu will just ignore them all?
Well, the important thing is that actually, in terms of the measures, there is nothing actually. There is no specific instruction for Israel. All the things that it demands Israel do. Israel says it's doing already. Now, you may or may not believe them. Excuse me. You may or may not believe that, but Israel says it is taking account of civilian casualties. It is only targeting military targets. It says the civilian casualties are collateral damage. It says it is allowing humanitarian aid in. It is saying that it is the UN that is responsible for the slow pace of humanitarian aid deliveries. So there is nothing specific that Israel has to do to change.
And what do you think the international response is going to be to this from the United States and, of course, here in the UK?
I think it's a relief for the United States because they don't have to do anything. There was a big issue if they had, the judges had demanded that Israel stop the war. That would have then gone to a Security Council resolution, which the United States would have had to veto, and it would have been that would have put in a very difficult position to decide whether to veto a ruling that had effectively been ordered by the International Court. It doesn't have to do that. There is no such order. It can carry on warning Israel, as its allies have been doing, as Britain has been doing, about the extent of civilian losses and the humanitarian situation. But it doesn't have to impose sanctions. It doesn't have to support sanctions. And it doesn't have to support a resolution at the UN Security Council that it wouldn't otherwise want to.
And of course, presumably Britain will be having lots of discussions behind the scenes with America, and Britain will probably follow exactly what America does, as many people, including the Germans, probably.
Well, Britain's actually has struck out rather in a change of policy in the last few weeks, particularly since David Cameron became Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron. He's taken a much more critical tone towards Israel, and he did demand a ceasefire actually when he came to Israel and met Netanyahu this week. So Britain has actually struck out a somewhat different tone on Israel, though it is muted in the terms in which it puts that change of policy. It's not. It doesn't want to give any succor to Hamas by any means, but it is calling for a ceasefire and end to the fighting.
All right. Well, look, Richard, thanks very much for that update. That's Richard Spencer, who is the Times' correspondent based in Tel Aviv.